In today's video, we're going to be discussing some offseason plans for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Will they once again be reevaluating their goalie situation, and does Matt Murray have a future with the Maple Leafs? Plus, we also have some update from NHL player safety regarding some fines from last night's action. Lots more important games today with playoff implications, other milestones around the league, some college prospects, a big lawsuit in Arizona, as well, and all that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a fair bit to cover here today. Before we jump into the news, I do have a day in hockey history moment to reflect on, but unfortunately it's not one that really, has fond memories. It's something that we wish never happened, but it's actually 5 years ago today that the Humboldt Broncos bus crash took place, of course, in Western Canada. It was a tragic day. Certainly doesn't feel like it's been 5 years, but it really has been so far. I mean, unfortunately, 16 people lost their lives that day. There were 13 survivors. I know we've seen a lot of stories about those who have survived, many of which had, pretty serious injuries and recoveries to go through. So it was certainly, not one of those historic days in the hockey world, though. We look back on fondly, certainly a very sad time, tragic time, and we certainly hope we don't see anything like this happen again. It's just such a incredibly avoidable situation that could have saved so many people's lives. But unfortunately, it was a tragic day out there for the Humboldt Broncos, who were on their way traveling to a playoff game but never quite made it. So 5 years already, it's hard to believe it's been that long. On to today's news, though. We have some fines from NHL player safety. We actually have 3, 2 of which came from a game last night. Following the Tampa Bay Lightning and the New York Rangers, things certainly erupted and got quite feisty. It kind of felt like it had a feel of a playoff game where you see a lot more rough stuff and a lot more reactions to different things. Tampa Bay forward Alex Killorn left with a fine for $5,000. They call it slashing. I'm kind of surprised in the way they didn't call it spearing. But essentially, you got to stick right into goalie Igor Shesterkin. So that's a $5,000 fine. And New York Rangers defenseman Adam Fox also fined $5,000 for slashing against Lightning forward Corey Perry. I believe Jacob Trouba also left that game injured. He took a hit and it kind of looked like his face made contact with the ice when he went down. Certainly looked like a bit of a scary situation. Hopefully, whatever he's dealing with isn't too bad or he's on him too long, because that would be a big blow to them if he wasn't available to start the playoffs. We also seen a fine with the Pittsburgh Penguins and their defenseman Mark Friedman, who's been fined $2,000 for embellishment, which apparently happened in their last game against the Philadelphia Flyers. So to get a fine for embellishment, you usually have received a warning prior to that. So that tells us that Friedman likely did receive a warning before. So I'm not something that I quite know exactly what the situation was, but obviously player safety's had their eye on Friedman and talked to him before if he's getting a fine for this. Staying with Pittsburgh, we have another signing which actually happened later yesterday after I already recorded the news video for the day, but they've signed a goalie prospect here, Joel Blomqvist. It was a 2020 second-round pick, goalie out of Finland. Had a solid season playing over there in Liga for Karpat. Put up a 2.29 goals against average and a 907 save percentage. So he'll look to make the jump to North America and see how his future works out with Pittsburgh. I do suspect that this offseason we're going to see some change between the pipes for the Penguins. I mean, starting goaltender Tristan Jarry is a pending UFA. I don't think he'll be back with the Penguins unless he goes on some kind of miracle playoff run, which we've yet to see out of Jarry. Jarry and DeSmith both ran into issues last year. Of course, Jarry, a lot of it was injury related, of course, but Tristan Jarry has not really had the playoff success that we've seen other goalies in the past, like obviously Murray and Fleury when they were winning Stanley Cups back in those days. So we'll see, but I do suspect changes, and we'll see if this guy that they've just signed can be a part of the future solution here in that position. The Jackets also announced a signing. I believe this was over a day or so ago, but I think I forgot to include it in yesterday's video. So the Columbus Blue Jackets said to extend youngster Yegor Chirikov. He's on a 1-year contract extension for $800,000. His ELC was expiring. The former 2020 first-round pick had missed a lot of time this year due to injuries. Only appeared in the 30 games, so seems fair. They came to the compromise of just doing a 1-year contract for now to see if he can stay healthy and bounce back in, but have a more complete season to better evaluate where his future's at, where his role with the team, future innings and all that kind of stuff. So we'll see if Chinnikov can have a better season next year. Lots of things went wrong in Columbus this year, a lot of it injury related as well. So he's not the only one for sure. Tonight, the Avalanche are going to be without Cale Makar and Darren Helm. And apparently these are new injuries, and there's no timetable as of right now for a return. So that's certainly not promising news. The Avalanche have been on a bit of a roll, working their way up the standings into first place in the Central, getting back into a more secure spot for the playoffs, and now more injury news again. So that's certainly not good news for them. The Boston Bruins tonight are also going to be without Taylor Hall and once again and David Krejci, although Hall appears to be close to returning. I think it might even be a bit of a cap issue why he's not. He's been on LTIR, so I know that is something that was reported before, that there might have been some behind-the-scenes growing frustrations with some of the rules and cap situation that he wasn't able to come back. So we'll see how much longer. I mean, they only have a few games left before the playoffs get underway. So we'll see where that goes. Some big games tonight for the NHL schedule that have big playoff implications, including the Ottawa Senators and the Florida Panthers. If the Sens lose in regulation, that will basically do them in. But I believe the New York Islanders also have to pick up at least 1 point. The New York Islanders, of course, also played tonight as they did battle the Tampa Bay Lightning, who are on a back-to-back. So if the Islanders pick up points and the Sens don't, they're basically done. But at the same time, if the Sens win and they get some help, then they're still going to be technically in it. They still have low odds of getting in. They need everything to go right for them and lots to go wrong for the teams in front of them. The number is dwindling down. Buffalo's still right there with them as well, though the Sabres play the Red Wings tonight. So if Buffalo can pull off a victory there, then they'll still be technically in the mix. But it's basically down to Florida, the Islanders, and the Penguins. But the Sens and the Sabres are technically, mathematically still in it and are still trying to pick up points so that they're not out and still have meaningful games. Well, we'll see. But they're all in action tonight. So it should be interesting because Pittsburgh also plays the Minnesota Wild, which will be a tough opponent for them. And the LA Kings in the Western Conference will be doing battle with the Vegas Golden Knights in a battle for those top 3 spots in the Pacific Division. The Edmonton Oilers had another milestone last night, continuing to be on quite the run they are right now, but they now officially have 3 100-point players, with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins hitting the milestone for the first time in his career last night, joining Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. This is the first team that had 3 players with 100-plus points since the 95-96 season, and just the 14th in NHL history to do so. So it's quite a feat. They've been getting the goaltending. The defense is better since Ekholm has come along. You got to wonder if this team could be a real threat to win the West and have a real shot at the Stanley Cup. I think that they're in a better position now than they have been in the last few years for sure. But I guess we'll see when playoff time comes around, if they can live up to the hype or not. This weekend is going to be keeping a close eye on some key prospects around the NHL. Some more prospects will be having their seasons end. Some of these guys will be done anywhere between Friday and Sunday, Monday, depending on how their teams do over the weekend. But we're bound to see potentially a few more potentially significant signings for some of these NHL teams, getting some key prospects in their lineup. I know a couple to keep an eye on. There is more than just a few here, but Matthew Knies, of course, is going to get a lot of attention because being a Toronto Maple Leaf prospect. Elliot Friedman talked about him today on the Jeff Merrick Show and wondered if one of the concerns that maybe getting a deal done to get him to sign might be the bonus structure, because as we know, ELCs can certainly have different bonuses included, and a lot of the other recent Leaf prospects like Sandin, for example, or Robertson, had to forego those bonuses to get their contracts then to be able to play. I mean, a lot of that has to do with not that the Leafs are being cheap, because they're not a cheap organization at all. They certainly are willing to pay and sometimes overpay for their people, but they have a very tight cap situation, and if rookies come in on ELCs and they hit their thresholds to get those bonuses, it impacts the cap, and they just haven't been in a situation to really be able to allow that. So some recent prospects haven't been able to get them. If Knies is insistent on having that built in, it could be problematic. If he's not too concerned about it and just wants to play, should get done relatively quick, but we'll see. But the Leafs might have another weapon to add to their arsenal here over the next couple of days. And of course, Luke Hughes, another one from the Devils, defensive prospect, could likely have played in the NHL this year if he really wanted to, could join his brother Jack and come out of Michigan and sign with the New Jersey Devils this weekend. We'll see how that goes. And there's lots of other prospects around the league too to keep an eye on. Just a couple of more higher profile names. Of course, there is another situation going on with the Coyotes that could prevent their arena deal for getting complete. I do have a more dedicated video on the channel, and I posted earlier today, so I'm not going to go into this in great detail. I just want to briefly mention it. If you want a more in-depth explanation on the full details of what's going on, you can check out the other video. But of course, a few days ago, we had talked about on one of our news videos here that there was a lawsuit against Tempe from Phoenix. So Phoenix was suing Tempe because of part of their project that they're doing with the Coyotes here for this new arena entertainment district. That was part of it was housing, and they had issue with the housing components and how things were going to go in that regard. And there was a lawsuit coming from that. Now there's a lawsuit from the Coyotes and their development people against the city of Phoenix for damages, which is basically saying if your lawsuit over here that you're putting against Phoenix or against Tempe is going to prevent us from developing, we're suing you for billions of $2.3 billion, I believe it is. Essentially, it's kind of like we're reportedly having discussions. The Phoenix is saying that Phoenix and Tempe, the mayors, city managers, everybody had a big meeting to iron out these concerns and things that Phoenix wanted to change, and that they expected and thought everything was going well, everything was going to be agreed to, and that Tempe just kind of cut off discussions at the end when they thought they would review documents and sign off on it, and that never happened, so according to them. So since that never happened, and they proceeded in the original ways that Phoenix was not happy about, then they decided to proceed with this lawsuit. So it's complicated for sure. There's not multiple lawsuits involved. The first one's not directly, obviously, against the Coyotes, but certainly has implications affecting them for sure. And now, obviously suing them suing Phoenix for damages as well. Just really thinks, gets things thinking here that could really be held up. And certainly puts this whole project in jeopardy to some degree. I don't know. I mean, this is all politics. The Coyotes people basically are saying that Phoenix essentially is trying to maintain a monopoly, so to speak, in the entertainment world within the area. And that they said that they, obviously allowing other things to take place, like basketball arenas, ballparks, other types of things. And then suddenly they want to do this, and there's this manufacturing crisis. So it sounds like it's getting, in some degrees, it sounds very childish. And it sounds like there should be things that they should be able to get worked out, but I don't know. Anyways, check out that other video for a bit more details on what each side is saying and a little bit more detailed analysis on that front. But it's certainly a big story that we need to follow. And as I mentioned as well, I want to talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs and their goaltending situation. More specifically, Matt Murray. Does he have a future in Toronto? This is going to be another offseason where the Leafs have to reevaluate their goaltending situation. And will Murray no longer be a part of that solution going into next season? You certainly have to wonder. I mean, between Murray and Samsonov going into this year, I know myself, based on Matt Murray's recent past, had a lot more confidence that Samsonov would work out for the Leafs, and he certainly has. He's proven to be a nice pickup, good addition, and he himself is on a one-year deal, so he's going to be wanting, I'm sure, a fairly substantial raise, as he certainly earned it and played extremely well for the Leafs. But Murray has been, like he hasn't been in Ottawa, and even at the end of his tenure with Pittsburgh, often injured and inconsistent. He's had some good games, and he's shown flashes of being a great goalie. He did that in Ottawa too. But then he, like I said, as soon as you thought he was getting on a good run and he was going to show some consistent play, he'd get a stretch, 2, 3, 4, 5 games. Then he'd get hurt, and then he'd be out again. And then when he'd come back, then he would have some struggles, and then eventually he'd find his game, and then he'd get hurt. And it's the cycle that's been ongoing for the better part of, you could say, at least 3 years, if not a little bit more than that. Even when he was in Pittsburgh, he was often injured, but he just seemed to be able to find his game for longer stretches, and when it mattered most, being able to get those Stanley Cup championships to his name. But obviously, like I said, you're going to wonder if they were going to be looking to move him or move away from him in some capacity. Now, Matt Murray has one more year of his contract, making over $6.25 million is what he was signed to on a 3-year deal by the Senators. Still 1 year left on that. Of course, after Ottawa picked him up from the Penguins in a trade, thankfully they only paid a second-round pick. But then, of course, now they had to retain salary, and there was obviously some sweeteners involved with moving things around. The Leafs could possibly trade Murray to a team like whether it be like a Chicago and Arizona, or a team basically that's going to be near the floor and may not care what he's making, and may not care about how successful they are. Like, for example, there are teams like that around the league where that could be a fit. Like, we've seen them move on from Mrazek last year. So that's something that, I don't know if they're going to really want to have to pay another sweetener to move on from another goalie. That would hurt, especially considering the amount of draft currency they've moved out over the last couple of deadlines. But still, we know that Dubas and the Leafs are not afraid to do this. And secondly, is Dubas going to be the GM? That's another big question, because he himself does not have a contract beyond the end of the season. So that's going to be another story to follow. But at this point, we don't have any reason to think he won't be there. But until it's secured, you just have to kind of have that wondering thought at the back of your mind. But at the same time, here, Matt Murray, of course, is his total contract value per cap hit is $625 million. The Leafs are not on the hook for that whole amount, though, because the Sens obviously had to retain some salary during that trade. So it was like 4.8 that the Leafs are covering. So they could consider a trade and retain a little bit more money. That's possible. Or do they look at a buyout? If they don't look at a trade, or they can't do it without costing them too much, a buyout actually wouldn't be that bad. Where it's only 1 year left, you take 2/3 of the remaining money, and you obviously do that over twice the period of time. The other kicker too with Murray is the actual cash cap, like the actual cash amount that he'd be earning next year would be $8 million. So essentially next year the buyout could reduce his cap hit by over $5 million. So like they could reduce the total cap hit, that the Leafs would only be on the hook for like $600,000, and then the Sens portion would be reduced as well. Then they would have one additional year tacked on with a $2 million cap hit. So they could save considerable money for next year. So there's certainly, worth looking into as a buyout if they can't do a trade. I don't think the Leafs are in a situation like they were with Mrazek, that they needed to offer up a valuable asset, whether it be a top prospect or a higher pick in the future, to make this contract go away. But could they run with a tandem of Samsonov and Joseph Woll for next year? That would not be surprising at all. I think this year's playoffs run will obviously dictate a lot of what happens, though. I think no matter what, I think the odds of them keeping Samsonov in the mix are very, very good. He's certainly earned that right so far. If he has any playoff success and they win at least a round or two, I would not be shocked, obviously, that then maybe he gets a longer-term deal. It will probably determine how long they commit to this guy. But Woll could very well be the goalie of the future as well. And could certainly, looks like to me like he's probably ready to at least be a 1B or something for next year in the NHL. When he's been called up, he's done well. We have no reason to think that he couldn't be a legit full-timer in a, not as a starter, but, as a backup or 1B scenario. So we'll see. What do you think with the Leafs goaltending next year? Is Matt Murray going to be done with the Leafs? Are they going with Samsonov and Woll? Will they make some sort of another trade and figure out another guy to bring in? What are your thoughts? How will it work out? Let me know your comments in the comment section. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.